So where all these like the analog pins and the digital pins, those are actually just female headers soldered into the Arduino board. If you get the Arduino Fios, which are like little mini Arduinos, they don't come with any of the pins soldered on. So you have to either solder male or female headers onto it to then use it. So male headers are useful to solder on if you want to be doing breadboard work. But also, if you want to be making like custom little like rigs or something where you don't want to be using boards, or you want to keep your board space to a minimum, but still want to have like your sensor a decent amount off your board. So say you're like Jesse who's been dissecting toys and putting Arduinos in it. You might want the lights way up in the eyes, but the Arduino's down in its body. So you can solder wires into these, and it just works like essentially the same as if they become just long headers essentially. And so I'm going to solder a couple wires to this. This is an altimeter. This will measure this light. Although the ceiling.
Could you also just go close?
Is it getting my back?
No. Well, I just want you to show like what you're talking about because.
Oh yeah. And so this is an altimeter. It's accurate, I think, within almost like around 30 millimeters of height change, so a decent amount. That's about, what? It's about 4 inches or so, I believe, if my math's still right, which could very well be not. So anyway, what I'm going to be doing for a custom project is I'm going to actually be tracking the motion of my cats. And so I'm going to be using an accelerometer and an altimeter to build a 3D map. And so what I want to do is, we'll take our chip, I'm going to do wires for this one because I want a lot of flexibility in where I can position these sensors in the harnesses I'm going to be making. And so, let's solder. Yeah.
For the male headers, you have that long strip like you do right there,
yep.
15 or however.
So these are break-offs.
Yeah.
So these just snap right off. They're pretty flimsy plastic in between. You guys want to see how there's little rivets in there? They almost like just form. You can just snap them right off.
The camera too, please.
Yep. So you can get a good close-up. You can see there's little indentations, and you can snap right off. Hell, I'll just do it. See, right? Pops right off.
Boom.
Yeah, exactly, like a chocolate bar. All right, so here we'll get a nice top-down view of me. This is like, okay, that's dangerous. Alright, cool. So, we want to always be close to the fan. I was soldering, my first time soldering, I was not next to the fan. I didn't have a fan, and I had a little scritchy throat later on. You're not really going to be inhaling lead. Lead doesn't evaporate, but you will be inhaling flux fumes, which just isn't good for you. I think some guy last night was saying if you solder a lot without using any ventilation, you can actually get emphysema, so that's no bueno. Don't want that. So, here's what we'll do, and I'll do multiple ones so people in the back can cycle in and see what we're doing. So the best way to do this is you put your soldering iron in place of where you want the flux to go. So I got the wire in position on the hole already. I'm gonna start by putting my soldering iron on the wire I'm going to, and then I just bring the flux in there. Just kind of fill the hole. That didn't work. Sometimes it likes to go up the soldering iron instead of down into the hole. There we go. There we go. Now you can see right there on the edge. You see how there's a little mound of solder there? And it cools fairly quickly too. So now there we go. See how you want to make sure you get a good amount in there too. Because you want to make sure on the back side you can see that the connection's all filled. Right there. See? We got filled connections. And so that's what it's going to be. If you guys want to pass around, that's what it should look like. It's very simple and straightforward. You just want to make sure you get a nice little dab of solder in there to bridge the connections.
And things to look for are like when it turns shiny, that's how you know that the resin is...
Yeah, it's formed a nice solid bound if it gets very shiny metallic. Other things to look for, when I get multiple wires in here. You do not want any solder touching between these two bridges, because then it will send electricity through it. So this is basically what you can think of. You're basically making it like this soldering iron just becomes part of the connection, and it's like fusing these wire and then the connected port together to pass electricity between it. So anything else touching that solder will pass electricity between each other, and you can fry your sensor boards. Hopefully not your Arduinos, right? If you have a fucked up sensor solder.
You could fry anything, but
Sure. But most likely just
that's part of the game.
yeah, figuring out.
The key is if anything starts getting hot or you start smelling something.
Yeah, and so if you have a really, this chip, what's nice about this is it's fairly big and none of the electronics pieces are actually like very close to the soldering holes. If you do have a very compacted chip and you got a lot of electronics near the soldering holes, it's best to give a little, like take a little break, like a 10-15 second break in between, maybe like 30 seconds in between soldering each part. You don't want to overheat the chip and melt the electronics. Sometimes you'll see like a little sheen, like it's almost liquid going out. You're not melting the plastic, that's just the flux kind of spreading out. The flux isn't really, don't worry about that. It's as long as the metal itself is not touching your other wires. So we'll do another one. Yeah, you can. You might melt the plastic a little bit, but that's not a big deal. Because melted plastic won't interfere with the connection as long as the metal is on the metal. It might just smell bad.
But if you're gonna do that, you might as well just like there's extra wire in that cabinet there.
Oh,
So
shit.
like the orange wire, for example, you can just strip that and use it instead. So I mean then, thank you, Dana. Then you don't have to, because like your dumper cable's already kind of like pre-made, so you can test stuff. So you don't need to.
And so, as I was saying earlier, it's definitely better to bring the soldering wire to the tip of the iron. Because that way you have a little more control over what you're doing. And you can get your soldering iron directly in there. So I'm just going to let it sit a little. Get that, and it helps too, is I get the wire itself heated up. So that almost helps me get it all hot enough. That's enough. So this isn't like the best mount just because it kind of moves a little. So I'm going to try and get it. There we go. There we go. And so, you see how the first time I did it all sunk in? You want to create a little pyramid so that would be a sign that you know that you got like a good amount of in there and you for sure got the connection bridge. So now, got two wires in there. And the solder, it dries pretty quick and it's pretty strong. The best part about the leaded solder is you have to really yank on it to break the connection. Like, I just soldered this, but moving the wire all around, it's no problem. The connection's not breaking. And then afterwards, I generally, see those wire strippers? That big, like, yeah, right in front of you, right to the right, actually. So unfortunately, that big set of wire clippers kind of sucks. But it's best to then afterwards. I don't like how long these extra wires are, so I'm gonna just go through and clip those off. So it's just a nicer connection. That way they're less likely to touch each other too. So now, bend those off a little. So. There. So now, you can see we got two little wires going off, and I can just now start plugging this into the breadboard, plug it in. Those two inputs are good to go. When you have these chips, you do have to do every hole. Every hole is used on these. And so like the very simple ones will only have usually like 2 inputs or so. But like my accelerometer says 8. So I'm gonna have to solder 8 wires to that for what I want to do. Okay, you're gonna end up going through wires and headers pretty quick if you're doing PCOM. So does anyone have a sensor? Did you guys in the back want to get a close view of what I was doing, or did you see? Alright, does anyone else have a sensor and want to give it a try? Yeah, let's do it. What do you want to solder? Oh, every hole, so here we go. Let's get up here, homie.
Ooh, very cool.
Yeah.
Everyone's smart.
So you want to generally, they say to be at about within 12 inches of the fan. FYI, this tip, extremely hot. If you touch yourself, even briefly when this thing's all heated up, you will burn the holy hell out of yourself. So do not,
It doesn't get red or anything. Like, I feel like I forget.
do not touch that. It will hurt like a mother. I've done it. It sucks.
So is it like this?
So yeah, exactly. So the best way you'd want to approach this is you can set it upside down, like this. And now what's nice is that holds the weight. It's using the weight of what she's trying to solder to kind of keep it in place. And so I'll do the first one. So I'm going to hold this iron right there next to the wire, and then just dab. Now it's forming that connection. Yo, alright, did I do too much on this? Come look.
It's the dad try it. It's like piling up.
Kind of looks like it might be touching, or is that fine? It's fine. So I got a little aggressive there, but it's not touching the connection, so that's the key.
I got mine in the
Which one?
See, this, we don't want to touch those little metal pads together because that's all just conducting electricity, those metal pads. So here, it's easiest to start on this far one. You want to give it a go?
Okay.
So hold the iron to the pin that you're going to be soldering. Don't do the wire yet. So get the iron right up on the pin. And now, once you have a nice, now touch the wire. Yeah. Oh. Oh. Don't give any more. I think you got enough flux. There you go. So now it's got the connection bridged there. And what you can do too is you can use the iron to kind of maneuver the solder around to make it thinner. Because it will all liquefy again. It will cool within a few, like almost instantly. See, there we go. Don't worry, this circuit, see, you're pretty far off the electronics. These circuit boards can take a lot of heat. You can get this iron right on there, let that hang for a bit. It's not going to hit the circuit unless you're like overheating the microchips themselves. So like we can maneuver this solder around to the other side to kind of get it clean. Yeah, so when you get in the middle, the best way to do is just come from this side like that. Want to give that? Do you have this desoldering on? So after, and if you mess up, don't worry. There's this thing called it. My girlfriend does it like the brute force, whatever. She just drips the solder off. That's not the ideal way. There's this thing called a desoldering iron. I have no idea how to work this. I was going to show us how to do it. So basically, this is like a little pump. So when you get the soldering hot, release the pump and it'll suck up the solder. That's how it works. Yeah. Alright, perfect. Yeah. So I don't think they're touching. I think that's perfect. Yeah. Look at that. See, there's no bridge between the two. We'll get. So, boom, if you want to keep soldering this, we can get you set up on this guy right here. You generally want to be between 70 and 75 on the soldering. Done. Don't hit any of the wires with the soldering iron as they will melt real quick. So once this starts blinking, your iron's hot, it's going to solder. Does anyone else want to give it a little go? You guys have some headers or sensors you want to solder? The best way to do it is practice. Get in and get dirty. But as you see, it's a very simple process. It's mostly about just being very precise and careful And you're gonna fuck up. It's gonna happen. It's not avoidable, especially like you get a minute shake at the last second. Might move it up. Don't worry about that. You can always remove the solder. It melts and it generally, it's almost like mercury in that it likes to stick together. So it's fairly easy to get it off if you do screw up. It's better to be safer than sorry. So like if you think that the connection might be touching another one, just desolder it, get rid of it, start again. Because it's better to waste like a minuscule amount of solder than it is to fry your sensor boards. Because if you do get cross connections, that will cause all sorts of hell. I think these are all good. The only thing that might happen is these wires are so loose they might touch each other. But the soldering itself is actually do have a little. So this would be a case of too much solder. You guys can see that it's a little. It's not super uniform. So the solder likes to stick. So when you get the perfect amount, it'll form a little cone around it. If you get too much, then it'll start to get a little floppy. So you can see that it looks like these two in the middle are kind of touching each other. So that will cause problems when we're trying to connect. So this will be a good way to show some desoldering. You're on. Here we have a